Hi guys, welcome back to my channel.
Life is a winding road, no telling where it goes. Driving through days and nights.
So in today's video we're going to be going through my September wrap up. If you guys don't know, basically I make beauty and book content, more so beauty than books, but we try and get as many book content in as we can. And yeah, I'd love if you stick around, so make sure you subscribe and hopefully you like this video. So if you guys didn't watch my TBR jar picks my September reads, you can go back and watch that to see all the books that I had picked out, although you will hear about them literally in about 2 seconds. But I picked out 6 books in that video, and all 6 books I completed. Well, that's actually a lie. I completed 5, and for the first time ever I DNF'd a book. So the first book I picked out was A Mile High by Liz Ford, and I actually DNF'd this book at 70%. I have never DNF'd a book in my entire life, and I especially would never DNF a book that late into a book ever, but I could not finish this. This was the most meh book I've ever read. I can usually stick to a book if I don't like it. I can usually power through and, you know, kind of just get through it. But when I tell you, this book infuriated me. First of all, it did not need to be as long as it was. And second of all, why was there so much repetition in this book? I'm not joking you. It was one of those things where I actually wanted to scream. Every time I was picking up, I was saying Joseph, I was like, I don't even want to read this because I know what is going to happen. If you don't know, this book is about 2 characters, and one of them, I can't even remember their names. That's really bad, isn't it? Anyways, one of the characters, she is a flight attendant, and she is a personal flight attendant for is a hockey team? I'm pretty sure it's a hockey team. Yeah, it's for a hockey team, and she travels around with them. Anyways, she basically doesn't mind giving these boys a taste of their own medicine, essentially. Like, she doesn't care about being snappy with them. In the first little bit, we find out that one of the hockey lads is kind of a bit of a arsehole, essentially. Kind of demanding, kind of a bit like, you'll get me this, you'll get me that, but like in a jokey way. Anyway, she gives him the same banter back, and from there a relationship blossoms, and it's just going through their relationship. But what I found really weird was, it wasn't like we got to 80% and they then got into a relationship. We were in a relationship by like pretty much the get-go, and I kind of was like, where's this gonna go from? I knew there was gonna be some sort of conflict that was gonna show up, but at the same time I just did not see where this, like, what the point of this book was going to be, or like where it was going to go, because by the 70% they were already in a relationship. He had bought a dog from a dog shelter that she worked at or volunteered at, and I didn't know where it was going to go. But the reason I DNF'd it was because of this. It was too long, and then it was too repetitive. So he would say one thing, so say he'd be like, I'm going to a hockey game, then she'd be like, oh, he's going to a hockey game, and then it would be like they'd say it together then in a scene. So like, you be his POV, he would say it to himself, then you go to her POV, she would say this to herself, and then when they were in a scene together they would also say it. So it was just constant repetition. It was constant, like, we were hearing the same shit different days type of situation. Like, I was bored. I was so bored, and again, like I said, I never DNF a book, so for me to DNF that book was ridiculous. It was that bad. But yeah, so I DNF'd that at 70%, and it just really wasn't a book that I would pick up again. People did say though that if you didn't enjoy the first book, the next 3 are really good. So I will continue this series, and please God that they get better, because when I tell you, this book literally made me never want to pick up another one of those books again. I'm not joking you. And I never understand this, because there was another series where they said the first one was terrible. The Twisted series. People didn't like Twisted Love, and I liked it. I didn't love it, but then Twisted Games was my favorite, which is the second one, and again, it was everyone's favorite. So I don't know why they're putting the worst books first, but then again, I suppose you can't develop on people and characters if you don't even read the first one. So yeah, I suppose, but dear God, it was difficult to get through. Okay, so then the second book that I read was Window Shopping by Tess Bailey. This is why you should read blurbs. Okay, so basically I don't read blurbs of books before I go into them. I just go off of people's recommendations. Didn't realize this was a Christmas book. Did not realize that this was a Christmas book. So I was reading Christmas in September, and I'm not gonna lie, I actually thoroughly enjoyed it because it wasn't too Christmassy. It was Christmassy, but it wasn't too Christmassy. Like, Christmas was the background of this book, but it's basically about Stella. She has basically just gotten out of prison. She's just gotten out of prison, and she's kind of getting back on her feet, and she is really like wanting to get a job, but she's kind of like she's trying to get back into life essentially. Then she is looking at a window in one of the, what is the store actually called? I'm not too sure, but the premise is basically she is staring at this window of a store, and in the store the manager sees her looking at this window. Is like, what do you think of this window? And she talks about, in the window is like penguins, and she basically is like making jokes about the window, saying it's not the best. And he's like, well, we're actually hiring for a window display person, why don't you apply? And she's very unsure about doing that. And then she gets home and she's like, look, why don't I? She applies for it, she obviously gets the job, and then her relationship with the manager kind of starts to blossom, but it also delves into kind of like her life and kind of how she has a lot of self-doubt. But I loved this book. I gave this book a 3.75 stars. I rated 3 on Goodreads, and I know you're being like, well, how do you love if you only rated that? It was just a cutesy little book. It was a cutesy little book to get me through the rest of my TBR. Like I said, didn't realize it was a Christmas book. But what I loved was, I loved the dynamic between Stella and Aiden. Aiden's the manager of the store. I really enjoyed the dynamic between them. The communication was amazing. I found that he really understood her, even before he found out her past and why she was the way she was. He was just very understanding from the get-go, and their communication was very good. There was just a lot of boundaries, and I really liked reading that, because sometimes boundaries get crossed, or there's a lot of mixed messages or really bad communication. But when I tell you that this book really had very good communication and very good boundaries, it was beautiful. And also the characters are very self-aware. Like, Stella was very aware of, she didn't try and blame her past on someone else. She very much understood why she was the way she was, and she understood why Aiden was the way he was/is. And also, I really like the vibe of Aiden. Aiden gave me man vibes, like man vibes, and that is my vibe. So yeah, I really liked him. I would really recommend reading this book. I thought it was very good. Okay, so the next book that I read was Normal People by Sally Rooney. Guys, when I tell you I loved this book so much, now am I biased because it's set in Ireland and obviously I'm from Ireland? Probably, but it really was just the book I needed when I needed it. It was very much written in a way of normal people, and it very much was the way the dynamics of Irish schools are and colleges and universities. Marianne and Connell, like, them two are the most complex people I've ever seen, and yet they are so relatable, which sounds so stupid because they're so complex, and obviously their stories don't line up with mine at all in terms of like how they live. Like, Marianne is very much a, her family has money, her mom has money, her brother's a little bit verbally abusive, and then we see physically abusive towards her. And then Connell is coming from a mother who has to work very hard to even just survive and live. It's one of those things where they come from two completely backgrounds, but they bond so much over just life and how they don't feel like they fit in. I don't know why I thought it was going to be set around one period of time, when in fact it is absolutely not. It is set over a good couple of years, and it's set over basically them going from being in school to obviously growing up into university and stuff like that. And it follows them as characters and how they drift apart, and then they come back together to kind of like get involved with each other again, like sexually, and that they kind of really rely on each other. But then again, they get separated and they get brought together, and they each also have separate relationships, that it just never seems to be the case that when they really want to be together that they're able to. And it's just really weird because, am I out myself here? Probably. Myself and Joseph, we've known each other since we were literally like 12, and we're together now 5 years. But it was always the case for us where when he was with someone I wasn't, and when I was with someone he wasn't. And so I just really related to this book. The only thing with the book that stressed me out in the beginning, but then I actually loved it, was there's no set punctuation. Is that the right word? Yeah, punctuation. Like, you could be reading it and you're like, oh shit, we're actually in the middle of them saying something. You don't go from like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, paragraph context to then be separated into dialogue to then back into like context. It's very much like it all flows into one. Eventually my brain was able to finally understand what way it was gonna read. Took me a while, took me a good while, I can't lie, but when I finally got into the flow of the book, I love this book so much. Again, like I said, it might be because it very much describes normal people and normal life. It also might be because, like I said, sorry about this noise, I'm on a beanbag. It's also because it is set in Ireland, and obviously a lot of the stuff that was said in it is very relatable because it's exactly the way the setup will be for like me from being in school. So yeah, it was just really nice to see their dynamic, like in terms of like friendship and also in terms of relationship, because again, like I said, it low-key reminded me of, I'm not saying high-key, it low-key reminded me of myself and Joseph's relationship, like I said, through the being with someone but the other person not, and then vice versa, and then also just going through life together trying to figure out what you both want. Like, I loved this book so much. I think I will definitely reread it in the future. I gave it 4 stars. I don't think it's a 5-star for me, purely because I haven't been thinking about it since, but when I read it, I loved it. I couldn't wait to get back into it. And yeah, if you haven't read Normal People, I would highly recommend it. I really want to watch the series now, but I loved it. I loved it so much, like so much. And yeah, probably one of my favorite books that I've ever read. Next, I read The Housemaid by Freida McFadden, and I feel like everyone and their mother has already read this. I obviously clearly have not. I gave this book a 4 stars. It was not a 5-star read for me. I understand why people were giving it 5 stars because it is very an interesting book. It got me sucked in. I couldn't wait to keep reading it, but I feel like, but maybe it's because I read a lot of Freida McFadden's books already that I kind of knew what was going to happen. It was kind of more of a storytelling for me versus a shock moment. But there was one part of the book towards the end that I kind of predicted was a thing, and that this relationship was a thing, and I was correct. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I will continue the series 100%. I think it is very good. If you don't know, basically it's about this girl. Once again, why are they all getting out of jail now that I think about it? But she basically has gotten out of jail and she is basically looking for a job. Aren't they all? She's basically looking for a job, and she gets hired by this nanny, and she thinks it's a bit too good to be true because it's full board and it's unreal money and it's for this like big amazing family. And she gets there, and the wife or the mother, well both, she essentially is batshit crazy. Like, she's gone delulu. Like, she is gone delulu. She'll tell her to do something and she'll go do it, the housemaid, and then when she goes to do it, she'll be like, I never told you to do that, how dare you do this, how dare you do that in my home? And she's like, what is going on? And then the husband's like very sympathetic towards the woman, is basically like, look, she's a bit tapped, she wasn't the same as like when I first met her. And then they have a child together, but it's not his, but it is hers. And the mother's telling her one thing about her child, and then the father's like, no, she's not like this. Like, it's just a bit, it's a bit mad. And in the end, like, a lot of things unravel. I feel like with thrillers, especially when there's plot twists, you can't really say much about the book because you'll give stuff away. But I really enjoyed this book. I think it is a very good premise, but again, I don't know whether it's because I've read a lot of Freida McFadden books or whether it's just it is what it is type of situation. I kind of saw where most things were going, like 99% of things were going, but I will continue the series. I really enjoyed it. It was a very fast-paced read, as is all Freida McFadden books, but that's what I like about her. She is chef's kiss. One thing I will say though, as a mum of 2, well, even just as a mum in general, not even a mum of 2, there is a little bit of child abuse in it that I didn't realize was going to be in it, because again, I don't read the back of books and I really should, and it is very small amount, like very teeny, but that triggered me quite a bit. Like, I felt very ill and very sick, and that's just obviously since having my boys and going through like postpartum anxiety and stuff like that. Like I really struggle with reading anything bad about kids. I can't watch the news about kids. I can't know anything if a child is involved. So when that came up, it really shocked me because I didn't think it was going to be part of it. There was one specific scene that came up that really, like, I felt like crying. Like it really hurt me. And if you don't have kids, or if you don't relate to this, you're probably like, it's not that bad. But I struggle to get through that a lot because obviously I have 2 boys. I have 2 little baby boys. So yeah, that I'm just putting that out there. If you are a mum, or if you're someone who gets triggered by child abuse, I would either skip that part or just be aware that it is in it, because like I said, I really struggled to get through it. Then book number 5 was The Love of My Afterlife by Chrissy Greenwood. Guys, I don't know why I didn't rate this a 5, but it obviously just wasn't a 5-star for me. I rated this 4.75. When I tell you, this is probably, besides ACOTAR, this is my second favorite like book. I am obsessed with this book. This was the funniest book I ever read, so much so that I forgot it was even a romance. If you don't know what it is, it's basically about this girl and she passes away, basically, in the funniest way, by the way. And when she gets to the afterlife, she's met with this like afterlife therapist who is basically telling her, now you're in the afterlife, like enjoy. And she's like, absolutely not, I'm not being here. Anyways, in the time she's talking to this afterlife therapist, another dead person arrives, and when him and her meet, they have like this undeniable connection, and then it turns out he's actually been unalived. Wrong, he's not actually dead, so he needs to go back. So the afterlife therapist sends him back, and your one's like, no, why'd you send him back? He is literally my soulmate, he is like my person. And she's like, oh well, you can't go back, you're actually dead. And then the afterlife therapist basically says, well, there's one way you can go back, and it's if you do something for me. And her quest is, she has, is it 10 days or 7 days? I think it's 10 days to go back to Earth, and she has to find this man and she has to kiss him, but he has to kiss her out of his own will. So she sends her back, and it's basically about her quest to find this boy and yeah, basically kiss him, or him kiss her, and then if he kisses her, she can stay back on Earth. But in this, there's kind of like a subplot. Basically she has like this horrible neighbor who like hates her, she hates him, and he's being dragged into a lot of the stuff because it's basically he does her a favor and she'll do him a favor. And yeah, it just basically goes along with their dynamic, and then also her trying to find this man. But when I tell you, I have never laughed so hard at a book in my entire, I don't think I've ever laughed at a book. I was out loud hysterically laughing that I was telling Nicole. I was literally sending her videos being like, girl, you need to watch this, like it was hilarious. I was telling Joseph was looking at me like, why are you laughing so hard at a book? It was an unbelievable book, so much so that again I forgot the romance even existed, because the quest that this poor girl has to go on is just hilarious. She has so many things that she has to do that just put her in the situation, and the way that this author writes essentially is like inner thoughts actually on paper, and I absolutely love that. I loved the fact that we were basically getting the whole, like, you know when you think something in your head but you never say it out loud? That was what this was. I absolutely love this book so much. I write notes after every time I read a book, and basically I said it would have been a 5-star, but it slowed down a little bit, about 75%, that I was kind of just going through it just to get to the end. Yes, okay, so while this was an overall amazing book, that was what my brain was thinking. There's a section in the middle that kind of wasn't about her and the neighbor, and it wasn't really about her finding her man. It was about totally kind of like subplot. There's a lot of like subplot in this book, and there's a lot of like extra characters in this book that develops her as a person. But I found that there was one scene that I just was like, not that it's not necessary, but I just didn't find it necessary, and I kind of felt like, yeah, it slowed down the book. And it's about, she does something for one of the characters, and it's a whole scene about this character, and then that scene triggers something in her brain to continue her quest. But I don't know, I just felt like it kind of lingered too much on that, and it was kind of, there was too much detail about that certain scene, because obviously it clearly went on for too long, that I was like, oh come on, I kind of want to see where this is going to end, like what's going to happen, because I genuinely did not know what was going to happen until the very end. But no, I thoroughly enjoyed it. There was a little plot twist at the end which I really enjoyed. Probably one of my favorite books. So if you haven't read The Love of My Afterlife by Kirsty Greenwood, I would please make sure you read it this year, because it is incredible. And any of the books that this author brings out, I will 1000% be reading, because she's just hilarious. I need to read all of her books now. She's one of my new favorite authors. Okay, and the final book that I read was The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is the first book in the Naturals series. I rated this 3.75 stars, and it was nearly a 4-star, but the start, it took me a while to get into, and then the end, didn't really love the plot twist. I loved a plot twist, I didn't love the plot twist. It wasn't until I was about 20% of the way through that I really thought, oh, do you know what, I actually really like this. But once I got into it, and once it got into the whole premise of the book, I was like, okay, I'm in, and I was like reading. The overall series is basically about these teenagers, these young adults who are naturals. They basically have natural abilities to seek out either lies in people, or they're able to read people's body language without them even saying anything. They've all been picked out to help out the FBI or complete like cold cases and active cases and stuff like that. But this book specifically follows Cassie, and Cassie is a girl who, her dad left her with her grandparents. Well, actually I think it was her choice, and her mother was murdered. She basically was sought out by the FBI. They're basically being like, you're a natural, we know you have the abilities to read people, we basically want you to come in and to train with us and basically help us solve cold cases. So she goes, and in this she meets like all the other people in this group, and she gets to know them. But throughout this, there's been a couple of murders that have been happening, and she realizes as they're working out this case that the murders are done in a very similar way to her mother's murder. So she believes that the person is trying to reenact and basically try and like copy the mother's murder, and she thinks this will be her mother's murder. So she goes to one of the crime scenes, and she realizes that the murderer is actually leaving some sort of hints to Cassie herself, and she starts getting parcels. She realizes that this person is actually trying to get her to kill her. We go through that, and in the end we get to see it all unfold of like the murderer and everything like that. But there was a few plot twists at the end that I really did not enjoy. I can't believe though that I read this book within 24 hours. Like literally I started it the previous night and I finished it the next night. Like it was done within 24 hours. But when I tell you, the last 40% of this book, I was feeling sick to my stomach. I was so anxious. I felt so ill throughout this entire book that I was like, what the f-? I said Joseph, I was like, I cannot, I don't think I can finish this. And I know it's only young adult, so it really shouldn't be like getting me like that, but the anxiety and the kind of like being left on the edge of things, and like you not getting the full thing, and it could be anyone that this murderer is, it made me feel really ill. And the fact that they were after Cassie and this person could show up anywhere just made me feel really ill. Like I was not okay. I felt like I was gonna be sick. My heart was pounding, which now that I'm thinking about it, it's a young adult, Leah, like calm down. I really felt on edge. The ending was such a good plot twist, one of them, but like I said, the second one just really didn't do it for me. I felt like it didn't need that. If they had left it at the first plot twist, I would have been so happy. But the second plot twist, I really did not enjoy. And again, when it comes to thrillers and mysteries, me saying this isn't giving much context, but if you've read The Naturals and you've read the first one, please let me know what you think about the like second plot twist of like, it didn't happen. That's all I'm gonna say without giving too much. Please let me know what you thought about that. Yeah, it ended up falling so flat for me because of that plot twist that it really brought it down from a 4 to like in the 3-star rating. If they had left at that, it would have been a full 4-star for me. But yeah, that last one just really didn't do it for me. At the time when I wrote this, I said I don't know if I'll continue the series, But if the rest of the books lead us to what we were meant to find out in this book, then I'll keep reading it. But it was not worth that amount of anxiety and nauseousness. I have decided I am going to continue the series. I think the next one is called Killer Instinct. And if you haven't watched my TBR jar picks, my October reads, I will leave it in the cards. But basically I didn't get that book in that, so it won't be this month that I'll be reading this. I'll be reading this, I'll be reading that. But I will say it will eventually get read. So I am excited to continue this series. And yeah, that's all the books that I read in September. So guys, thank you so much for watching today's video. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed hearing all my thoughts and opinions on all of the books that I read in September. As I said, I've never DNF'd books, so the fact that this is my first reading wrap up and I DNF'd my very first book, I think that is good going. But please let me know what was on your September reads, and also please let me know what is on your October reads, because I need inspo for the coming months. But yeah guys, thank you so much for watching today's video. Please make sure you subscribe, and yeah, I will see you in my next video. Bye.